Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about women in male dominated industries and how sometimes we tell ourselves we need to become mannish or work like a man in order to be taken seriously or to be successful, and the damage that causes. And this is a cautionary tale taken from my own life. And you will ignore or forgive my looking down and stuff. You're keeping me company as I chop vegetables for a soup. So ironic that domestication is part of this conversation, and that's exactly what I'm doing right now, so it's fitting. So basically, first of all, I was one of those women that even when I was a teenager, I related to the guys. So I was always accepted in the male clubs, and I was like the token one or two girls that was cool enough to hang out with the guys on a platonic level. And I took a lot of pride in that, and that became part of my self-identity, I guess. And I think that there's a bit of underlying misogyny in that. Like, I had girlfriends, don't get me wrong, but that I used to hold on to stereotypes, like I was too cool to hang out with girls, you know what I mean? I was more than just hair and makeup, so that basically assumes that women are just hair and makeup in my mind. Like, I have to do some deep digging there to figure out what was going on. But in any case, that was the reality. And yet, when I became an adult, the person I decided to partner with preferred traditional gender roles. And frankly, I didn't meet him until my 30s, so I was on my own for a long time and exhausted when I met him. So when I had the offer to move to a different city, not worry about rent or bills, and I just got a little part-time retail job so I could get a discount at my favorite store and be around people and have some petty cash, and that's all I ever had to worry about, frankly, I was quite grateful for that. So the idea is that we would have kids and I would stay home and homeschool, and he would be the primary provider. Well, I got pregnant and the pressure was a lot for him, and he just couldn't take it, and was, anyway, so I miscarried mid-trimester and needed some time off to recover, but he, like a week into my recovery, decided he was never going to work again, that it's not for him, he doesn't like people or the stress, and he just wasn't going to go to work. He told his doctor that his hands hurt and he worked on a computer, and that he just couldn't work anymore. But there was no health insurance or disability insurance set up yet or anything, so we were just suddenly without income, which means a week into my recovery, I have to go back to work. But remember, I'm only working part-time at a retail place, so that's not enough for us to survive on. So I start looking for a full-time job and got poached by a customer. Except the job I was poached for came with this warning that it was a very harsh environment. It was nicknamed the jungle. And that, if you were a woman, you had to be a certain kind of woman to survive working in that place. So make sure that, the men know right away you're there to work and not to flirt. Otherwise, they're never going to leave you alone. And, that, you carry some kind of weapon. Put it this way, my dad was very well known in that place, although nobody knew I was his daughter when I started working there. And when he found out that I got a job in that place, he showed up like a day later with bare mace, like a thing of mace, and said, I want you to have that in your pocket when you go to work. But that's illegal. So what I started doing was carrying a bottle of oven cleaner. Now that's feminine. Oven cleaner in my pocket and a lighter. And I did actually have to use it once. And whatever. But then see, that then fed the whole we're victim thing that moment. And then because I felt so strong that this guy, he was actually impressed. He wasn't even scared by what I did. He was impressed. And he kind of nodded and said, you're good, and went away. But, and I became a legend. I became a legend for doing that. So then I fed into that. And this environment was incredibly adrenalized. And one thing that I am learning now, and this I only learned recently, and actually now is the time I want to say who's helping me undo all this damage I'm telling you about, is Sri Namaste Moore. So I'm learning that, adrenaline for women, even if you're good at whatever, adrenaline for women is incredibly toxic over time. and does some real damage to you. But I don't know this, right? I'm feeling intoxicated by the power trip and the adrenaline, and I decide that I'm going to be as tough as everybody else, because when I first started that job, I was quite weak. Weak, but not weak. I was feminine, is what I was. But I perceived that as weak, because when I walked into that workplace, I was so discombobulated, but I should be. Like, that was not a normal environment, but instead I negatively judged myself for it. So I went to work in that environment and became incredibly adrenalized and thrived in it, actually. But it was grueling. But in any case, I did. And I learned a lot in that space, and I became incredibly strong and motivated and everything else, and thought, oh, wow, you know what, this is actually really good for me. But also at the same time, I was having a lot of resentment, because in the home life, I was still expected to do all the work. So I had to work all day at home, at work, and then, actually, I was working the night shift, so I had to work all night at work and then come home and still cook and clean and everything else. And more than that, he completely shut down. So he stopped taking any ownership for our future or life or direction, and I became, central station of the brain for our entire life, for both of us. So that became really draining, and I started to resent it. And then I would be judged by him and myself for resenting it, because I should be stepping up and all this stuff and, whatever. So things were getting kind of brutal for me in that regard. And then I joined my family's business, which is the used clothing bin business, which is even worse than where I was before. And at the time I joined was even violent. And because my brothers saw me as a flighty artist, I wanted to prove to them that I was of value. So I would try extra hard to be extra tough and to prove that I was as tough as them and whatever. And again, I became adrenalized and fed off that, and decided, I would have stupid goals, like how many grown men could I make cry in a week? You know what I mean? That was horrible. That's a horrible way to walk through the world. But that's the trip I played on myself, and it caused a lot of damage, especially because, so now I'm trying to grow this business, and I'm working like my brothers work, which is nonstop. My brothers are crazy. So these guys sleep 3 hours a day, and they're working nonstop. So I'm assuming that's what they expect of me, which they don't, because they treat me like a girl. I'm their sister. A few days ago, there was like a cold spell here, and they were dropping bins in the middle of the night, and they needed some permits that I had at home. So they asked me to come and bring the permits. So I did, but I was ready to help them work. I was going to shovel around the bins, whatever they needed me to do. So I'm like, all right, let's do this. And they're like, what are you doing? You're going home. It's cold. Get out of here. And I'm like, but I want to help. You go and you manage the customer service department. You do the marketing. You make all the business deals. Go home. That's where you belong. Let us do, the work. And for a long time, I resented that. It was like I had to prove even to myself that whatever they could do, I could do too. And you know what ended up happening with that? I fried my thyroid. That's what ended up happening. I got a fried thyroid, and that is not fun to live with, and I got really, really sick. So I had to start re-looking how I was living my life, and I didn't know exactly what the problem was. Was it that I was in an unhappy marriage? Was it that, I don't know what. I didn't know what was wrong. So I started to do some research, and that's where I came upon Sri Namaste Moore. And she did a talk about women and adrenaline and how that damages you over time. And one of the things she mentioned as a potential risk factor is a thyroid problem. And when she was describing that, it was like this big aha moment went off. And she started talking about how, scheduling things based on what flows with a woman. So men are all about doing, women are about being. And when you're approaching your business from the state of beingness, it's a very different way. You schedule, it's a very different way of everything. But when you do, it has really profound impact, and things will flow, because that, as a woman, is your point of power. I never considered that there was a way of, that there was a feminine consciousness to business. Like, that just never occurred to me. I thought that business was primarily male, so I just had to embody what I knew about men and prove that I was the same as them, because in my mind, equal was the same. And that's precisely what was hurting me. But the way she talks about operating as a business as a woman meant that I had to work substantially less and schedule differently and view my tasks that I took on differently. And to me, that was incredibly overwhelming. Also, a synchronicity would have it at the same time, because really when I went to her, besides my thyroid and needing to get back in touch with the femininity I felt I lost, because I was so out of touch, working with men, living with men, surrounded so much with men every single day, I was really feeling like I was losing my sense of being a woman. And the idea of working less, like, would my brothers get mad at me? They wouldn't understand. Like, I feel like I'm being lazy. It's taking me longer to do things. Like, you know what I mean? And I started to get really uncomfortable with her suggestion. But, I thought, doing the same thing hasn't been helping me. So let me try. And if it doesn't work, I'll just apologize and go back to the way things were. But let me try. While the strangest thing happened. The less I did, the more got accomplished. The smarter I got at delegating things to support staff, looking at the things I took on from ROI. I'm saying yes to all these things to fill my schedule so I could say that I talked to XYZ, ABC, DFG. But the truth is, a lot of that stuff, was flashy, whatever, but really didn't have an ROI. So it was just keeping me busy to say that I'm busy. But it's not really growing the business. So I started saying no to a lot of things and canceling a lot of gigs without apology. And then started to say yes to things that actually grew my business. I was more discerning of what I said yes to and started automating as much as I could in my business. Like, for example, instead of driving 2 hours to have a half-hour meeting, I'd say, I'm available over Zoom, and that's it, sort of deal. So that keeps me at home a lot more than I used to. I used to be on the road constantly, and now I'm doing a lot more work from home, and that's been a huge impact. So here's the thing. Ever since I started doing this stuff, I'm in the newspaper for business, I'm winning business awards, all this amazing stuff. I'm learning less impactful ways of making money, expanding my portfolio in terms of career. So the less I'm doing, the more is happening in my life, in my career, and the diversification of my career. So she was right. So then also, by default, when you are with Sri Namaste as a teacher, you also have access to Sri Richard, because they do a lot of their stuff together, and you can upgrade your account with her to also have access to his School of Alchemy. So I did that, and so there's a lot of business talk in there, and it's been amazing. So now, but what he did, he ruined my marriage. He ruined my marriage. So a big part of me taking that class or taking that course or joining that program was to save this marriage, because 12 years, right? I'm trying to fix it. And I realized that a lot of this has to do with me not being attuned with my feminine. So I'm the one hurting this relationship. So I thought I'm the one then that has to fix it. So that was a big part of me joining this. But then watching Sri Richard talk and seeing them engage together and everything else, I had to finally, after taking a few of their classes, I realized that the problem is that I married the wrong guy for me. And I kept trying to turn him into what he didn't want to be. And that was breaking him, and it was breaking me, when in reality I should have just left and found who I should have been with. You know what I mean? And you know how life has it. When you recognize that there's a problem, the universe suddenly conspires to make what you need to have happen. And things got so escalated that the way was open, that it was made clear I needed to leave. So I left the relationship, and with that time and that freedom, I've been able to reconnect with many parts of my female practice, or that many women find much care and fulfillment in, that I used to judge in a negative way, I am now relishing in for the first time in a long time, because I'm in a non-judgmental environment. I'm creating this environment for myself. And now I'm beginning to be more aware of what it is I actually want in life, in career, in a partner, and not willing to settle this time. You know what I mean? So it's been incredibly empowering. So many times when, you hear, well, someone wants to have a business coach, or do you need a coach? Coaching is bad, or whatever. And I don't even think that you can really qualify them as coaches. They don't even qualify themselves. Sorry, it's rinse here. They don't even qualify themselves as coaches per se, but they're a good guidance system, I'll tell you that much. This inner litmus test of whatever is how I would describe them. It has been incredibly impactful. And learning how to approach my business and my life from the space of the feminine, without changing my diet, without changing medication or adding supplements or anything, I'm feeling a profound change in my life. Just in my health, just my mental health, my emotional health, all of it has been incredibly enriching by making these changes. And let me tell you, this is the most stressful time of my life, honest to God. I am probably in the darkest days of my life, and I'm doing really great, all things considered. And that's because I'm occupying my feminine for the first time, and not fighting, not raging, not whatever. Do I slip? Sure. I mean, I'm sure Sri Namaste would not call me her prize student or her star student. But in any case, and even though I'm not a stellar student in that regard, it's still been profoundly impactful. So sometimes you need that voice, For me, sometimes it's even Gary Vee. But sometimes I get tired or I get bitter, and then I have the Gary Vee voice in my head saying, what did you think it was going to be? And suddenly that's okay, and I can keep going. Well, on terms of vibration and me occupying my feminine again, they've been incredibly impactful for that. So sometimes you need that push, or you need that sacred container, that structure to just help you think through things. And they've been incredibly impactful for me. So anyway, embodying the feminine, very powerful thing to cultivate. Have a great day.